Good day, YouTube. Today's topic is getting in trouble as a military member. Does that happen in the military? The obvious answer is yes, that happens. It happens in the civilian world, and my guess is that in the military it's actually less, but it does happen. Now, I do not have the percentage to compare to a civilian community, but because the military is a lot smaller than the civilian world, my assumption is that it's less than the civilian world. The other thing is when people come into the military, for the most part, they do a background check, they're screened, and overall the military has great people serving. Now, I am not an individual that speaks from the legal authority. I'm not into that career field. I speak in this video, like my other videos, from my observations, and this is my opinion. Now, did you know that military members are held to a higher standard than civilians? Hopefully the answer is yes, but if you didn't know that, now you do, and more importantly, you should know that, especially if you are in the military or if you're thinking about joining the military. One of the things that I like to say is consistency is a good thing. Being a good person, being wise in your decisions is a good thing. Consistency in that is a good thing. Now, we're all human, and I can tell you this, that service members, both officers and enlisted, sometimes get in trouble. Maybe it's a one-time event, or maybe it is consistently getting in trouble, and that's not a good thing. So that's how come I'll be upfront that both enlisted and officer people are humans, just like the civilian people out there. Now, there are some examples that are minor, some examples that are big. For example, my first example is if you get a speeding ticket out in the civilian world, the military side isn't really going to find out about it for the most part, unless you're going 50 miles an hour or 40 miles over the speed limit. That's not a good thing. But if you get a speeding ticket for 5 miles or 10 miles over, you'll just pay your ticket. If that happens on base, you'll get pulled over, military installation base, and you'll have to, at least for the Air Force, go to your first sergeant and tell him or her, I got pulled over. You don't pay a fine in most cases, but my wife got pulled over one time on an Army installation, and she did have to pay a fine, just like you would outside. But that's the first thing. The second thing is your leadership, when it happens on base, will know. An example of a major problem, whether this happens on or off base, is a DUI. DUI is a big deal. If you get pulled over and get a DUI off base, your leadership on base will know, and that's not a good thing. One thing that can happen is, as you get in trouble, you will be restricted, where you can't drive at least for 1 year in the Air Force on base, even though the civilian world will say you can drive, maybe a restricted driver's license, where you can go from work back to home, and if you're in school, you can go to school as well. But it's very expensive. I think now they're saying it's about $13,000 just to have a case of DUI against you. Other examples of problems, whether they're big or small, are drugs, drinking, domestic violence, financial irresponsibility, and maybe not paying your bills or not paying child support. Those are big deals for the most part. The military will handle the case based on what I've seen, even if the civilian world may say, you know what, this was dismissed, we're not going to pursue it, you're good to go. But the military may say, no, we are going to pursue it. So think of it like this. As a service member, you may have to deal with something with a dual military and civilian case, and that's not a good thing. It's definitely going to add to stress. Sometimes your coworkers will find out what's going on. That's going to be a stressful event as well. Sometimes in the military, you may be reduced in rank when you show up to work and your rank is one lower than it was last week. People are going to know. That's going to cause either stress, understandably, sometimes maybe even being embarrassed, and that's understandable again. I'm not saying that we as service members have to walk on eggshells, because we don't. when I joined the military, I could say that I realized I had to do the right thing, because big brother or big sister, the service, was going to find out if I don't pass a test in technical training, things like that. So I'm the type of individual that, for the most part, I know what the rules are, and I do follow them, and I like to please as well, in the sense that I know it's doing the right thing, especially when it's clear. There's a lot of structure in the military, so you know what you can do, what you shouldn't do, and what you don't do as well. In most cases, the military is not an example of one mistake and you're done. It's going to depend on the severity of that mistake. If you got a ticket for being 15 miles over the speed limit, whether it's on or off base, they're going to frown on that, but you'll be okay. You can continue. DUI, I have seen over 21 years of service that sometimes enlisted often can recover from that and continue. And maybe they don't get promoted because that gets affected as fast, but they can continue and do good things. Now, for the officer side, if you do get a DUI, it is basically the last straw, and it's going to be a matter of time before you don't get promoted anymore. And if that happens, and you reach your higher tenure, which means you're maxed out at the number of years at your current grade, then you're going to have to separate, unless you are over the 20-year mark, where you can say, okay, then I'll just retire. What works for me is to observe others, see what works for them, what doesn't work, the positive and the negative, and then try to emulate the positive and stay away from the negative. In my life, I was in trouble one time, a big deal, and I actually got arrested when I was 22 for something very dumb. My fault. I take responsibility for that. And the Air Force knew about it when I joined. It was before the Air Force, and I came in on a morale waiver, which said I can't do this job or that job, but you can do the other ones. And I just got up literally from falling on the ground because I made a mistake, and I've never been in trouble since. In the Air Force, in my time, I've been in trouble once, and it is a silly example. I got a letter of counseling because, and that's not that big of a deal, but I got a letter of counseling because I was informed when I was leaving the fire department one shift that I had to go, that I was nominated, and I had to go in front of the airmen of the quarter board. Well, I didn't have a car, and I just found out that morning, and I said, you know what, I want to go home. I'm tired. I've been here 24 hours, and I didn't go. So I got a letter of counseling. My boss, who is now retired and a good friend of mine, said, I'm going to take care of this. We have to do this formality. But after 6 months, it's going to be off your record, and that was true. So it's just something very minor. Do people get in trouble in the military? Sometimes yes, sometimes, most often no. It does happen. Watch others, ask questions, do the right thing consistently, even when nobody's watching. Take care.